This is Sports Epreneur.
Well, I just thought we would talk a little bit about the draft coming up next Saturday, and you and I always get in kind of crazy debates on what different teams should do, and then I thought we'd talk about some of our trips to Pittsburgh, which always seem to have things go wrong.
Well, I mean, for anybody that has yet to book their trip, I think there's certain hotels that you should avoid. My biggest advice would just stay on the city side of the bridge. Stay in the city of Pittsburgh. Don't try to save money by staying on the outskirts because you end up in some interesting situations.
We figured that out a couple of years ago, didn't we?
Yeah, we tried to stay at one of those extended stay style hotels. The lovely receptionist she said, let me make sure I give you the right key, because the last person I gave a key to ended up in the wrong room, and they walked in on somebody getting their cheeks clapped. Then we sat down and decided to change rooms after that wonderful hospitality.
The funniest part about that is, we were going to make the best of it. And so we took your dog with us. And then, when we went to the room, he wouldn't even go in the room.
Yeah, he got all stiff-legged and put his paws out and was looking around. And we got in there and he was sitting in the corner panting. And I was like, yeah, this might not be if the dog can't stay here, I think we need to go. But then we ended up in a really nice place. There are actually some good spots in Pittsburgh, and we ended up, was it the Wyndham?
Yep. And we actually went from the outhouse to the penthouse on that one.
Yeah. And then we ended up they had a nice little hotel bar, and we saw one of the most legendary drinkers I've seen in my time.
Yeah. That guy was buying shots for everybody in the bar, and he was drinking car bombs. Yeah.
Yeah. So he was drinking. I think he had about 5, and then he came over to us and offered us one, to which we politely declined.
Yeah. The funniest part about that story is when we ended up in Virginia, 2 or 3 weeks later?
Yeah, we were in Farmville, which is where I went to, the area I went to school, and we're sitting there at another bar, which we free. And he walks in, and I looked over at you, I said, Dad, is that guy from Pittsburgh? And you went, there's no way. And I tapped him, I said, hey man, this is going to sound crazy. He goes, but did you go to the Steelers-Jets game this year? He went, oh my God, you guys. And we were like, yeah, man. And then he bought us a drink. So he was a pretty cool guy.
Yeah, that was cool. What do you think about the draft? You and I talk about this all the time. And on this podcast, obviously, we're not professionals, but we just give our own opinion. So what do you think about the number 1 draft? And if the Raiders, I guess, who have that, what do you think they're going to do?
Obviously, we don't have any internal sources. We're not, Adam Schefter. But, I mean, I would be surprised if it's not Fernando Mendoza. I mean, I think that's the right call. Though they did sign Kirk Cousins. They went down the Kirk Cousins track. He got yet another 5-year, $60 million deal, something along those lines. Which, I mean, I think we have to give, on a separate tangent, someone needs to put a statue up of Kirk Cousins' agent. Yep. I certainly think Kirk needs to put a statue up of his agent in his house, because he has made that guy millions of dollars for a lot of nothing.
Yes, I mean, excess of $400 million. And I always say I like the guy. I think he's a great guy. And I think he's had some good seasons. Obviously, his stats are good. But, I think he's won one playoff game maybe. And he's made an excess of $400 million in the NFL.
His lifetime earnings is $341 million in the NFL.
Yep. Yeah, that's crazy.
He just signed a 5-year, $172 million contract with the Raiders.
A lot of guaranteed money, too, I think. So
yeah, they said around $339 million of the money he's made has been guaranteed earnings.
Well, teams keep signing him. He must have something. So,
I mean, I think the agent has some dirt on somebody, because I don't see how. Let's look at his career record. I mean, I know we're talking about the draft here, but let's see. Career win loss. He's 90, 82, and 2. So he's just above 500. And I don't know, maybe he has one playoff win.
Yeah, that's what I thought. He had one playoff win maybe when he was in. Yeah.
One in a 14-year career. He's 1-4. And the thing about Kirk Cousins, everybody cracks that he can't win in the big games, and he can't. But I think, ironically enough, Kirk Cousins and Fernando Mendoza are very similar people. Obviously, they kind of have that quirky, goofy, dorky personality. But
So what I always say is, you look at the Raiders last year, they were 3-14, wasn't it, or 4-13?
less than that, maybe 2 and something, 3 and something, yeah.
Yeah, to me, you need a whole lot more if that's your record. I mean, obviously every team needs a quarterback, but you need a whole lot more than just a quarterback. And so I'm always like, hey, trade that number one for multiple players that are going to help your team, and maybe try to grab a veteran or grab a quarterback later is kind of what I always say, because there's no guarantee that quarterback pick at number one is going to work out.
Well, I mean, I think I will say they had a really good free agency. I know they had that debacle with trying to trade, what's his name? Trying to trade Max Crosby to the Ravens.
Right.
And the Ravens got, cold feet on the wedding day, which I think, technically the Ravens didn't do anything wrong there, but I still think, I think they're going to kind of pigeonhole themselves with working with other teams in the future. But if you look at the Raiders free agency, they signed Tyler Linderbaum, who was a top-tier center. They got Quay Walker and Nakobe Dean, who are two premier NFL starters at linebacker. They got Kwity Paye, a pass rusher. They got a receiver in Jalen Naylor. They signed your favorite Connor Hayward, actually.
Yep.
So and then they re-signed a couple guys. They re-signed a cornerback, a defensive end, defensive tackle. And they lost Kenny Pickett, which is going to be a tough blow for the squad.
Yeah.
But Kenny's going to go to Carolina and really give Bryce Young a run for his money.
Oh, is he seriously going to Carolina?
Yeah, he signed a 1-year deal with Carolina.
Wow.
Pickett did.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I mean, he's on his 5th team in 5 years or something like that. But yeah, I mean, I think the Raiders had a solid, going back to your point, yeah, they need more, but they had a solid free agency, and they got a good center. And they have a pretty decent offensive line. And I think that is the most important thing there. And what they have in terms of weapons, I don't know about that. I think they're going to have to get some receivers, but you live and die by your quarterback. And in these leagues, very rarely is a team patient enough to say, let's build the roster and find the quarterback later, which I think is something like the Philadelphia Eagles have done in the past.
Right.
They built a great roster, and then they've plugged in a quarterback. Jalen Hurts is a good quarterback. I don't think we're going to I wouldn't put Jalen Hurts in the top 10 conversation, but he was a good enough quarterback to fit within what was an insanely good roster. I think that's really hard to do, especially if you're Vegas, because they have an impatient owner, and is it Mark Davis? Who needs a new haircut, by the way? I don't know if you've seen the bowl cut that Mark Davis is rocking these days, but somebody needs to get in his ear. But, I mean, I think they're going to take Fernando Mendoza. I'm willing to put, I think that's a 99.99% chance. I don't see where they would trade out of the number one overall.
Yeah, I mean, I like him. I liked him. He showed a lot of toughness in the national championship game. But, I'm always concerned about it. Does that translate to the NFL? And you got guys that were all world in college. Vince Young and Matt Leinart are two that come to mind. I mean, the year that they played in the national championship, I would have sworn those two guys were going to be top-tier quarterbacks in the NFL. They both went in the first round, and they both had mediocre careers and sort of ended up being backups. And so it doesn't always work. And that's why I'm saying, sometimes that number one pick's more valuable than the guy you may get at quarterback. And you've talked about that a little bit with the Steelers of this year of, is there a quarterback that they really want that would help them?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of quarterback success depends on where you end up, right? I think the Browns, someone that we see play a lot because we are big Steelers fans, they've drafted a number of quarterbacks, and none of them seem to work. So when the common denominator is you're the problem. If every girlfriend you date is crazy, I think you're the one that keeps picking the crazy girlfriends. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think you end up being the problem. So I think in Cleveland, they drafted Baker. They got rid of Baker. Baker is now a top-tier quarterback, or at least a serviceable quarterback, a playoff quarterback.
He's a starter, yeah.
The Jets is another good example. They drafted Sam Darnold, who just went on to win a Super Bowl. So I think where you go often matters a lot. It just so happens that a lot of those teams that are bad at picking quarterbacks end up being the ones with the top 10 picks and needing quarterbacks again, right?
Well, that's it. Year after year, I've been looking at Cleveland.
But here's the thing. If you don't take Fernando Mendoza and the guy ends up the two teams that pick next, the Jets and the Cardinals, both need quarterbacks. Even though the Jets just got Geno Smith again, I don't really think they believe he's their future. But
right.
If the Jets go and take Fernando Mendoza and he pans out, that's how you end up getting fired. And I think that's the way NFL GMs and coaches think is even if he doesn't pan out, you'd rather him not pan out on your roster than go be an all-pro or a Pro Bowler on someone else's roster. And
Yep.
what I will say about Fernando is he does have all the, like, what you feel like are intangibles. Like you said, tough as nails, took some shots. Like, if you think back to the Big Ten championship game, just took an absolute shot against Ohio State, got up, won that game. And then, I think back to the national championship game where, that quarterback draw was a busted play and he just willed himself into the end zone. Jumped, took a shot in the back.
We actually ran over a guy too there. I was watching that video this morning.
Yeah, so I'm willing to take a risk on a guy like that. I mean, he's also just seems, it could be all media training, but he says all the right things. He seems like a good kid, really, really smart, but he ran a lot of RPO in college. I think that was the big thing, and that's what, Kurt Cignetti really likes to run at Indiana, is that RPO action. Is that going to be his offense in the NFL? I don't know. But I do think he has the intelligence to be successful in the NFL. And I think that's half your battle there, is how are you smart enough to play in the NFL? But he's 6'5", 225.
Yep.
That's kind of the number you look for at quarterback, at least for me. I'm not into the small guys, so.
Well, the other thing too is mobility, and maybe you're not running as much, but the fact that he is mobile. We found out about that in Pittsburgh last year with Rodgers, particularly in the playoff game when the Texans were getting so much upfield pressure on the Steelers, and Rodgers just couldn't move. They were just running him over. And 5 or 6 years ago, he would have run for first downs.
Well, I think my rebuttal to that, though, would be is Matthew Stafford's still playing football at a high level. And Matthew Stafford's not any more athletic than Rodgers is, and they're roughly the same age. I think Stafford's, 38?
Right.
But the thing is, they are elite at the offensive line position, and they get the ball out of his hands really fast. But they do so where they're creating plays. They get the ball out of his hands, but it's a 5-yard gain. Not, I think you see a lot of offenses prioritize, passes towards the sidelines. And this is a personal pet peeve of mine. I've always been of the mindset, hey, the end zone's that way, right? The end zone is forward. So going laterally has never really made sense to me. But, I will say, if you look at some of the quarterbacks that are having success right now, I'm actually looking at the draft order now. The Titans took Cam Ward last year. I think he's very talented, can move around. They just have a roster of a JV football team right now.
Right.
Dart for the Giants is mobile. Jaden Daniels for the Commanders is mobile. Mahomes for the Chiefs, obviously. Dak can move around a little bit. Lamar, who we see twice a year, is incredibly mobile.
Yep.
And then the Vikings just went and got Kyler Murray. Justin Herbert can beat you with his legs. Caleb Williams for the Bears. And then, of course, we're, forgetting one of our personal favorites, Josh Allen in Buffalo. All these guys can move a little bit, right? You don't need to be Randall Cunningham. You don't need to be Lamar Jackson. But you got to be able to escape the pocket just a little bit.
That's it, or pick up a key first down with your legs if you need to. And that was really our problem in Pittsburgh last year. And the playoff game just epitomized it, was just not being able to move. Of course, I think our offensive line was not good, and there were a lot of people at Rodgers' feet the whole game.
I think part of that, though, is and I hate to bash on Arthur Smith because Arthur Smith seems like a nice enough guy. Now the offensive coordinator at Ohio State. I think he went to Ohio State because he saw Jay Smith on Ohio State's roster and thought he was going to get more of Johnny Smith. But anyways, I don't think our offensive play calling put the players in the positions to be successful. And we talked about this before with DK Metcalf. I don't think they put him in a position to be successful within their offense.
Yep.
The few times that they gave him the ball in space, he did incredible things. And so sometimes I think you just have to let your athletes be athletes. And so I don't think Arthur Smith did Rodgers any favors in the play calling, because when you have that much upfield pressure, run a halfback draw, run some screens, run some 5-yard slant routes across the middle, because they were sending the house and they were just teeing off on our offensive linemen. And it's well, if your offensive linemen have to pass that 50 to 60 times a game, I don't care how good your offensive line is, you're in for a rude awakening.
It seemed like our left tackle and guard were rolling around on the ground the whole game. They just kept running up. They just were going upfield. They weren't doing anything but just coming straight upfield and running our linemen over. And so who do the Steelers take?
I'll say that the left guard that you were talking about just left and went to Arizona because he is excited to be in a place where he can win games. That's what he said.
Yep.
He said the money was nice, and I think if you looked at his contract that they gave him, he left for the money.
What was the Cardinals' record last year?
Yeah, I mean, they're picking third.
Okay,
So,
that tells you
I mean,
something.
I don't know.
That's not winning.
Yeah, and they're going to be trotting out probably Jacoby Brissett or Gardner Minshew this year. But yeah, I mean, you're asking about who the Steelers should pick, but I'm just looking like there's a lot of teams that need quarterbacks, us being one of them, but there's not that many quarterbacks really to choose from, right? So the Jets have 2 firsts, one at 16. I could see Ty Simpson going there. And he's really the only other quarterback that I think is projected to go in the first round, and I'm not a crazy Ty Simpson fan. So if I'm Pittsburgh, there are some guys that I would prefer. One being Vega Wane. He's a left guard for Penn State, so Steelers like local guys. He's big into the offensive line. Teo is a trenches guy. He likes the trenches. He likes the big boys up front. But I would say left guard, we just lost our left guard. We need a guy that can step in. I know a lot of people are of the mindset that you can find a starter at guard later in the draft. So I would say if you're not going to go guard, let's just get another weapon. Let's just get another offensive piece, right? Whether that be Denzel Boston from Washington, or Mekhi Lemon from USC, or Jordan Tyson from Arizona State. There's a lot of options at receiver. Adding a young weapon to go along with DK and now Michael Pittman, which I thought was a great trade. I think now you can kind of say, let's just build almost a quarterback-proof offense, right? Let's just put a bunch of weapons back there. You got Jaylen Warren, who's a really talented running back. You just got Rico Dowdle, who's coming off back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. Let's get an offensive guard, and then let's get as many receivers as we can and go from there.
Yeah, I think the focus really needs to be the offensive line. If you're not going to, get a quarterback, then, go for offensive line. I mean, I like our receiving core a lot better this year because you now got another guy on the other side that can help Metcalf. I like the running backs. Of course, our tight ends are great, and we've got the biggest tight end in history, I think. So,
well, I think we're going to have the biggest receiving cores in the NFL. If you look at it, Metcalf is 6'4", Pittman is 6'4", Freiermuth is 6'5", Darnell Washington rather.
I think Denzel's an actor, isn't he?
Yeah, I think he could maybe play. He could play like Mike Tomlin in a biopic later, maybe.
Yeah, we picked up Denzel Washington.
No, so Darnell Washington is 6'7". So we're just going to be massive at the wide receiver position.
Yeah.
And so I really hope we do play a physical brand of football that way, because I think that's awesome just to be bigger than everybody. But personally, I would say if it could happen, I would give up a couple picks and maybe go try to get Jeremiah Love from Notre Dame. That would be a personal dream, because I think he can make an impact on your offense, not just as a running back, but as a receiver as well. But I mean, I think that's a pipe dream. I think realistically they'll go receiver or offensive guard. And I know offensive line is not the most trendy pick, it's not the most flashy pick, but I think at the end of the day, that's where you win games, is in the trenches. So we're in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's going to be the hot button. So we're talking about them, and we have some bias for that.
Well, you look at the teams that have won the Super Bowl. I mean, I think of the Eagles. You mentioned them earlier. That offensive line was the year they won the Super Bowl was fantastic. And so,
I mean, think about all those years with Brady winning in New England.
Well, that's it. I mean, how often did he ever even get touched? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think the trenches are where you win games on both sides of the ball. And I think one thing the Steelers have also struggled with in recent years is the run game on both sides. They're not a really good running team. And they also have really struggled to stop the interior run game. They took a defensive tackle in the first round last year who helped their run game. They took another tackle that same draft. I think we just signed another defensive tackle in free agency, and Sebastian Joseph Day. So they are very, very invested in trying to shore up the interior of their defense, that kind of, B gap to B gap. And I think what they also might need is another linebacker to go along with Patrick Queen and Peyton Wilson. I really like Peyton Wilson, but he's a little light, because he's fast. But you need a guy. We need some guys that could come in and just stuff the run, and I think that's something that they've lacked in a while.
Yeah, the Steelers defense has been vulnerable right up the middle. I mean, most of the rushing that's done against us is just straight up the middle. I mean, it's just amazing.
And we have Derrick Henry in our division. We really need to shore that up. I will ask you: is there anybody? I know you're not necessarily the biggest college football prospect guy. But is there anyone that really strikes your interest as a Steelers fan of who you'd like to take?
Well, obviously, just like you just said, and you're a Notre Dame fan, and we spent some time up there a couple of years ago. Love is amazing. I mean, I might even, I think the Steelers have 12 or 13 picks coming up.
12 this year.
And so, yeah, I mean, that's an opportunity to say, could we trade up? I don't know how far up you'd have to get him because, running backs don't always go in the top 10.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see because if you look, when you get down to like 5 to 10 is where you could see anywhere where he could fall, right? Like you could see him going at 4 to Tennessee. You could see him going 5 to the Giants. You could see him going to 6 to Cleveland, which I would absolutely hate. Another thing that I would actually really like is when the Commanders pick comes up at 7, I would actually really, really like Jeremiah Love to end up in Washington because then I could go see him every weekend. That would be the dream. But I think, are there any other picks in the draft that's really compelling to you? Like the Jets have 2 picks here. I'm curious to know, like they seem to have a lot of needs.
Yeah.
So I wonder what they like. You have two picks here in the first round, so that should be 2 starters.
You're much better about knowing the players in college. You played some college football at Division III, and so you're a little bit more attuned. We talked about going to the draft this year in Pittsburgh, and I was like, yeah, that sounds interesting. But when you hear the draft, you go, I don't know that guy, or I don't know if that guy is really going to be good. You don't really know until they get in camp. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know who I'd pick. I think you're right about quarterback. There's not really other than Mendoza, there's not really a guy that you would just say, hey, that's the next Ben Roethlisberger, or the next Terry Bradshaw, to go back to my era.
Well, I think a lot of teams might be thinking that way, not even just from the Steelers' perspective. If you're going to take a quarterback, there's a lot of guys that you can maybe try to take a risk on, like in round 4 or even round 3, really, if you really wanted to. I'm thinking like guys like Carson Beck, who I'm not a fan of, but I'm thinking like there's Carson Beck, there's Drew Aller, there's Garrett Nussmeier, there is Taylor Green from Arkansas. There's some guys that may be projects in the NFL that like if you say like, hey, we have a 4th round pick, we're going to take a risk on Drew Aller or Carson Beck. But the thing about Carson Beck is he spent 6 years in college and he's still a project.
Yeah.
That concerns me a little bit. Like he's played a lot of football.
Isn't that what we did with Will Howard last year? And so we've already got a project on the team.
I think we've talked about this before, but like what my metric would be for the Steelers is he worse than or as good as Will Howard? If so, pass. Like I don't know what Will Howard's going to be. Like I think he went in the 6th round for a reason, right? Like whatever that is, like there is a reason out there that teams did not view him as a first 3-round quarterback, right? In a quarterback needy league, they did not seem to see him as a starter. Now, obviously things have been wrong. You can find guys in later rounds and get lucky. Of course, like Brock Purdy is a more recent example. I know everyone likes to point to Tom Brady, but that's kind of a unicorn. But like it's not impossible, let's say, to find a quarterback in later rounds. But like Will Howard has won a national championship. He's got a big arm. He's decently mobile. And from everything that, that some folks have said in the media, he's pretty smart. So if you're the Steelers, what does it hurt you? Like, I think we need to be realistic about Pittsburgh. They're not a Super Bowl roster right now. They're not going to make a push for a roster. So in my opinion, I would be a little bit more future thinking and say like, well, let's just see have we found a diamond in the rough with Will Howard? Or as the Yenzer coach, Mike McCarthy, calls him, Will Howard. They go, Howard. It's Will Howard. So let's see what you got, right? Like, Mike McCarthy, for a frustration about that hire, he does know how to develop quarterbacks. He developed Rodgers. Dak had his best 2 seasons under McCarthy. He developed someone named Steve Bono. I don't know who that is.
He was good. I remember him. Yeah, he was good.
I think he played when it was like black and white TV, right?
I think that Bono wasn't he the lead singer of U2?
I think, yeah. So like, I don't know who that is, to tell you the truth. I know people cite Steve Bono a lot as a Mike McCarthy quarterback that was developed.
He was good.
I think you were watching him on black and white TV.
That's it. Yeah, 3 channels, and I was the remote.
The 7-second tape delay.
Yeah, that's it.
No, I mean, I think the Steelers have some interesting options, and I don't think any of them are quarterback. I would really love to see what Will Howard falls for them, but I would also like to not see Aaron Rodgers back. Like,
Yeah, I'm surprised that, I thought the goal was for him to make a decision prior to the draft. I mean, not that you're going to draft a quarterback anyway, but doesn't seem to be that big of a push right now for him to make that decision before next week.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can look at that at one of two ways. I think one of the ways you can look at that is like they're letting him dictate their plan, or they were probably never planning to take a quarterback anyways, is what I
Yeah,
would think. Because if you look at it, ever since they drafted Kenny Pickett, the Steelers have seemingly been out of the quarterback drafting business, which, I get it. I get it. That was a
yeah,
bust. But I think what they learned their lesson for is don't take a quarterback just because you have to. I think a lot of teams make that mistake, and I think the Steelers, despite struggling at the quarterback position, what we've done really, really well is we have never, ever been invested in a bad quarterback,
right.
which a lot of teams have, right? Like you say, like we traded up to get so-and-so, or we spent a lot of money on this guy. And so you burn a few seasons because you go like, hey, we're invested in this guy. Like we have to see some return here. The Browns are the best example of it. You paid Deshaun
Yeah.
Watson $130 million guaranteed. If he's healthy, he plays, right? Because there's $230
Paid
million.
him that money. Yeah.
Yeah. The Steelers have never done anything. I mean, no team has ever done anything like that. But the Steelers have never gotten into a position where they're stuck at quarterback. And I think that's going to be the trend that they take this year as well. They're probably not going to go trade up for Ty Simpson because then you're invested in the guy. If he's there at 21, maybe. But they said the same thing about Fedor Sanders last year, right? Everyone said, hey, if he's there at 21, the Steelers should take him. He was there at 21, and they didn't, right? They went with what they felt.
And then he was there again in the third or fourth round, and we didn't take him. So,
Yeah, so I think the Steelers are not interested in getting desperate, right?
yeah.
But what I would say, and I've said this a lot, start Will Howard or Mace. Or just start Will Howard. I was going to say or Mason Rudolph, but even that, just start Will Howard, right? Like start Will Howard, see what he's got for you, see what he can be. If you go like, hey, we won 5 games, but Will threw 30 touchdowns, we got a quarterback, right?
Right.
Or you say, hey, he's not what we thought he was. We won 3 games.
Yep.
Now you're in the top 5. And, I know everybody is against the idea of tanking, and I've been very adamant about, not tanking. But I think at some point you got to face the music and say, hey, if you're not going to trade up, there's no other way to be in a position to take a quarterback.
Well, that's it. Look at New England with Drake May. I mean, they went 4-13, and they got in a position and got their franchise guy. And, the Steelers have been so focused on, we've never had a losing season, whatever that means, but you also haven't won a playoff game in 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, I think the mediocrity is almost worse.
Yeah, you got to get off the veteran thing where you're just bringing in a veteran to shore up. And like you were saying last night, if you got the guy in the wings that you just need to have a couple of years out of a veteran, great. But we haven't done that. We hadn't had the guy. We were so bad that one year with Pickett. Do you remember the Raven game that we went to?
I don't think we crossed the 50-yard line until the last play of the game.
And guess what? What happened?
It was a deep ball to Pickens, and we won.
Yeah, and we both looked at each other and said, how in the world are we ahead?
Yeah, I just, and I think that's something that's getting really boring as a Steelers fan. It is. When you win games, you're like, well, we shouldn't have really won that, but I'm happy we did. And when we lose games, either we get boat raced, right? You get taken out behind the woodshed, or you get in the situations where you why did we lose that? There was no reason for us to lose that game. Like losing to the Browns, if we lost the Browns, we locked up a playoff spot, and you could have played Will Howard to end the season, and you didn't get that opportunity because you couldn't close out the Cleveland Browns, right? So
we scored 6 points, 6 points against the Browns.
And I think, again, just focused on the wrong thing, man. They were so consumed with not letting Myles Garrett get the sack record, they've forfeited the game, basically. So I didn't really like that. And I think, they're so afraid to be bad that it's kind of handicapping them.
Yep.
But, next year, I mean, every year, obviously, things change, but next year is going to be a great quarterback class, man. We're assuming that Arch Manning's going to could be better, which I think he will be. He got better last year as the year went on.
Yeah, he did.
You'll have Arch Manning. You'll have Trinidad Chambliss. There's a chance C.J. Carr out of Notre Dame comes out. You don't know. That's a maybe. There's Lenore Sellers out of South Carolina. There'll be, I'm forgetting his name, but the quarterback that just transferred to LSU. God, what is his name?
C.J. Carr would be an interesting pick.
Yeah, I mean, he's a second-year quarterback, so he might be a Notre Dame guy for 3 years. But I would say, imagine a Manning being a Steeler would be cool if you could have a Manning in-house in Pittsburgh. And I think that should be your focus, man, right? Like, what can we get out of the roster that we have this year? Let's not put ourselves in a position where we're going to have to be stuck with a quarterback. And, like, you know, you talk about the idea, and I think you just kind of mentioned it of, like, if you have the guy waiting in the wings, everybody keeps saying, like, Steelers need a bridge quarterback. I'm like, well, a bridge to what? Like, what's the bridge to?
Really, a bridge to
Like,
off a cliff.
if the bridge is into a gully, it's a pretty shitty bridge. Like,
Yeah.
like I think
Yeah.
there's no guy that Aaron Rodgers would bridge you to unless you think it's Will Howard. Now, if you
Right.
think it's Will Howard, I would be okay with bringing Rodgers back. Like, if you think Will Howard's the guy. Now, if you don't, you know, I wouldn't bring Rodgers back. I would just say, like, hey, we're going to see what he has now. But if you don't think you have the guy on the roster now, there's no point in getting a bridge quarterback. You should start the quarterback you have on your roster. If you don't think he's the guy, you just have to kind of bite the bullet. And I understand what competitive, but, like, if you're just like, hey, Will Howard's a season away, cool.
Yep.
If you think, hey, we don't know what we have with Will Howard, let's just see it. Let's just throw him into the fire. I think that, and I honestly, if you announced Will Howard as the starter, I think Steelers fans would be way more excited about this season than they've been in a while. Even though that we probably wouldn't be that competitive, I think you'd still be excited to turn the TV on because you'd want to see, did we get a diamond in the rough in Will Howard?
Well, that's it. I think we've got to get off that, not being afraid for a losing season. I think it was unfortunate that he didn't get to play last year. He got hurt, so he didn't get any preseason games. And then if they could have beat the Browns, he would have had an opportunity in the last game of the season, so we blew that. I want to talk a minute about your girlfriend Sarah's team, the Broncos. I think they would, their quarterback got hurt, obviously. I think they would have been in the Super Bowl last year if he hadn't gotten hurt. Do you think that?
Yeah, I do. I think they would have made the Super Bowl. Do I think they would have won? I can't say for sure, but if you go back and watch that game, they couldn't move the ball. They were starting Jared Stidham,
who actually threw a touchdown pass to start the game, and that was it.
Yeah, so you thought they maybe had a chance, but the defense for the Broncos really held the Patriots to nothing, right?
Yep.
And it just never turned into anything. And so I think if you have Nix there, he can probably get you to where you need to be. Like, Bo Nix has come a long way. I was very skeptical when they drafted him. He wasn't someone that I thought was going to be very good, but he's definitely turned a corner. But there's weird chemistry, I think, between Bo Nix and Sean Payton. Like, I don't know if you've up with any of the stories, but Sean Payton went out and made some comments about the injury and said, he was predisposed for this. And, and then Bo Nix came out a little bit later and said, I don't think it's appropriate that he's talking about my medical history, and said, what he said actually isn't true. So, it's very weird, that relationship. So, I think he's their quarterback, but it's odd to see quarterback and head coach to be kind of at odds. Yep. And Sean Payton had famously not an easy person to get along with in the NFL.
Yep. I tell you what, though, they were good. And like you said, their defense was stout. I think that game ended up 10-7. What, 10-7?
Yeah, it was very low. I don't know the exact score, but it wasn't exactly offensive melee. So certainly left a lot to be desired. And I think if you have your quarterback there, you win. But that just goes back to show what all these teams are pushing for. And it's really the biggest reason why Fernando Mendoza is going to go first overall, because you desperately need your quarterback. And you can't get anywhere without him. So it's going to be interesting to see how that turns out. Anything other draft-wise that, you were itching and dying to talk about? I mean, the Steelers do have 12 picks, so I think there should be at least 5 of those guys should end up being starters. So, Well,
that's it. And I guess, do you think they picked 12 people? Like I said, I just think maybe that'll get packaged up somehow to move up in the draft is kind of what I'm hoping for.
It depends on who they want, right? If you feel like you can trade up and get a really good receiver like Carnell Tate or something like that, I'd give up a couple picks for that. They have seemingly stockpiled those picks for a reason. If it's to take all 12 guys, maybe. I think if you take 12 picks, you got a shot at hitting on a couple, right? Or, if you want to bundle up and say, we want Jeremiah Love really bad, we'll give you 5 picks to go get up there and get him. I don't see that happening. I think it would, the Steelers rarely trade up. They rarely make those kinds of moves. So I would be surprised. I think they'll probably stay pat at 21. I think they'll I'll go on record right now and say I think they pick all 12.
Gotcha. I want to talk about Eric's Buffalo Bills to kind of wrap up our podcast here today.
Is that his request?
No, it's not his request. I just wanted to talk about him. You know, if the Steelers can't win the Super Bowl, I really would love to see the Bills win one. It's been a long time for them. They definitely, when you talk about franchise quarterbacks, they've got probably the best guy in the NFL right now. I think maybe the window's closing a little bit on them. Do you think?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think things are getting shaky there. They just fired their head coach. They hired Joe Brady, which is an interesting hire. Never been a head coach before, was just their offensive coordinator, has gotten fired before as an offensive
Right.
coordinator in Carolina. He was actually he was the offensive mastermind behind the LSU team with Joe Burrow that won the national championship and broke all those records. I don't know that he has what it takes to be a head coach. I think that's an interesting call. It is nice to have Josh Allen. It's nice to have an offensive-minded head coach,
Yep.
but they need receivers really bad. Like
Yep.
they tend to just lean on Josh all the time. And they lose in some heartbreking ways, man. Like
They do. Out of money.
they really lose in ways that really, really hurt you. So, yeah, I mean, do you feel like the window's necessarily closing? I don't know that the window's closing. I think they're on a precarious situation where they could really waste Josh Allen's talents.
Yep. The team that lost the 13-second game against the Chiefs, I think that was the best Bills team. And I think that that year, if they could have beat the Chiefs and they had them beat, that was the year that I think they would have won the Super Bowl. Of course, you never know what happens in the big game, but I don't think they're as good. I think the quarterback's great. And like you said, I think he's had to just will the team to win a couple of times, but you got to have some support.
You do have to be realistic, though. Josh Allen has been at the center of some of the heartbreak as well. Like, he has made some mistakes in big moments. But they don't have weapons. Like, they're another team that really lacks, I mean, even a number one receiver right now.
Pretty good running back, I guess, and Cook, I guess.
Yeah, they got a pretty good running back. They got a half-decent defense, but, like, they don't really have a guy they don't have an elite pass rusher. They don't have an elite weapon on offense. And they lose in some pretty rough ways. And I think they're just asking Josh Allen to be Superman too often. And I think that's where the mistakes get made, is because, like, he's always trying to force the issue and make the great play. And I think sometimes with that comes turnovers, right?
Yep.
So I don't know that their window necessarily is closed. I know I said yes at first, but the more I think about it, like, I don't know that the window's closing, but they're in a very important moment.
Yeah, they got to get more balance. But, you know, Eric was actually in support of the coach being fired, even with all the success they'd had, you know?
I think part of the philosophy of the NFL has to be you got to move off good to get to great, right?
Yep.
And I think the Steelers never did that. Like, Tomlin stepped down and did him a favor in a lot of ways. But when do you move off, we're good right now, but we want to get to great, right? And I think a lot of teams are really scared to do that. And so I think the Bills took a really big risk. They said, we're going to fire a good head coach and see if we can get to great.
Yep, I think that's what Eric was saying as well, is, you know, we're good, but we're not elite.
But they gave Brandon Beane more power. That's the biggest mistake that I think they made. They gave the general manager more power, who, if you go back and look at his draft picks, have been bad.
Yeah.
Outside of Josh Allen, the picks that Brandon Beane has made have been very poor. And I think they really just got lucky with Josh Allen, to tell you the God's honest truth. Like, he was a big-time project coming out of college. He was a poor passer. He was not very accurate. And he really broke down the way he throws the ball and changed that. And that never works. And, like, if you look at, like, that very rarely works. They tried to do it with Tim Tebow. They've tried to do it with, like, Anthony Richardson. They've really tried to change, like, when guys try to change their throwing motions, it just never really pans out.
Yep.
So Josh Allen is such a rarity that he's been able to become a more accurate passer, become a more, like, much stronger passer. You know, I think they got lucky, but I think giving Brandon Beane more power is probably going to come back to bite them.
Well, he sure is fun to watch, though. You know,
Yeah, he definitely is.
If they'd just, to me, in the 13-second game, I think you got to kick that ball on the ground and make them field the ball, and because that would have run some time off, and you left 13 seconds in a timeout to Mahomes. I think if you'd have kicked that ball on the ground, it would have been about 9 seconds, which makes it really, really difficult for them to get in field goal range.
Yeah, I mean, you just never kick the ball to Tyreek Hill. Like, that was ridiculous.
Yep. So, well, this has been fun. I think we need to do it again.
Yeah, more of these.
Keep it going. Yeah, a lot of fun. So I appreciate it.
This has been a Sports E Media production.